Good morning. Anybody out there besides me?
Morning.
All right, quite a few of us. So, welcome to class. A few Zoom rules, so please leave your camera on so I can make sure you're there and make sure you're alert and alive. If you've got to drive somewhere, please do not drive anywhere while you're zooming in because it's dangerous. You could have an exception where you're riding in a car as a passenger and have like earphones in. But otherwise, please have your camera on to make sure I know you're there and you're tuned in. So gang, thanks for dealing with the technology switch. I have a feeling this is going to go quite a bit better. The university actually, I have a really nice computer here at my desktop. It's just the computer in class is not the best. So we're gonna try this out and see how it goes. Um, all right, so let's go ahead and get started. And let's pay attention over here because I could have people coming into class here a little bit late. So, because it's a different format, let's get the slideshow up and running here. All right. So this should look, are you all seeing my screen that says how to control for other variables through research? All right.
Yeah.
Awesome. That's what's supposed to be on there. So the big thing about research is we try to control for things. We try to control for stuff that's out of our control. And then if we can't control everything in research, it's tough. There are basically two types of research. One is field research, and field research is out in the field. You don't usually have as much, control over what's going on out there. It's in a naturalistic environment. We do a lot more observation. We can do a lot less manipulating. Um, so that's difficult if you're trying to make like a causal statement. But there's also lab research. And lab research, think about lab rats, where they control all aspects of a rat's life except for that rat breathing and and eating. So the rat has very little control over themselves. But so there's lab research, there's field research. Field research is better because you can generalize it. Lab research is better because you can control for more variables. It's tougher to find true answers in field research. That's one of the difficult things about science. So let's just go from here. So I want to catch up on some of our lectures, some of our concepts today. Can everybody hear me? Okay, is this working good? All right, sweet, sweet. Okay, so the scientific method. The scientific method absolutely requires observations. And so you're thinking, oh, well, I just sit and watch. Maybe in a true sense of the word, you sit and watch and you make little tally marks for how often you observe something. But we can observe things through a lot of different ways. So even if you do a survey, like you're asking people, about their opinions about things or their experiences, you're still observing their responses. It may not be live time, but on the back end, you're able to go and observe, how they responded. Um, Observation is necessary. However, there are actually four primary facets or canons or principles, rules that guide science. And these are the principles, and these will be on your test. So please, take notes on these. First of all, research is probabilistic, which means what? Who has an idea of if you're dealing with probabilities? What does that mean?
It's observing a chance of something happening, not necessarily guaranteeing.
Yeah, bingo. $32,000 winner. Absolutely, Abrana. So you're not guaranteeing something like 100% of the time. You're trying to, so it's like you're playing the odds a little bit. And you're like, what, science is like gambling or science is like the stock market or what are you saying here? Mm, there's a little bit of relation to that, but not completely. So we have a percentage that's like the magic number. in science, and our magic number in science is 95%. We want to be 95% sure that what we're observing happens 95% of the time. We give ourselves a 5% margin for error. In other words, let's say that we are, this is a rough discussion, so it's not a one-to-one, but to give you kind of an idea, let's say that we have a way of studying for an exam, and it's what you do is you listen to a recording of the professor every night while you're going to sleep, and every one of you do that. And let's say we have 100 participants. All right, that's an easy number to think about. So we have 100 participants in our experimental group where they listen to the professor giving the lecture every night before they go to bed. Then we have the control group, which they just go to class, they listen to the lecture, but they don't play it over again before they go to sleep. Then we go to the test. We give them the test, and we see that there is a difference. We observe a difference between, let's say that the experimental group, they get their average score is 85.5. All right, and let's say that the control group is an 84. And you're like, man, that's only a 1.5 difference. I don't think I want to listen to my professor. It's not like between an A and a B. I don't think I want to do that before I go to bed. But before we can document in science that that's a true difference, we have to run statistics. And the statistics that you learn, the bell curve and how to figure out the standard deviations, we use those to determine the probability if that difference occurred by chance. So we could possibly take just 200 people, randomly assign them to groups, give them in classes and give them an exam, and they score that way by chance. We don't want to then say, hey, Professor Randolph's method where you go and listen to him every night, that's been effective. We can't say that because we don't have the stats to back it up. We run our stats to try to find a 95% probability that, yeah, there's a true difference there. It's not just by chance. And I hope that's making some sense. It's probabilistic. I think it'd be easier if we imagine like, yeah, these 100 students, they got a 90 on their exam, and these 100 students that were in the control group, they got an 80. Well, just common sense, you're like, hell yeah, that made a difference. So these folks got an A, those folks got a B. But oftentimes, we need the statistics to try to discern whether something's statistically significant or not. So there'll be a key. This will be key in what we're talking about later on, specifically in experimental. But we're going to preferably explain a high percentage of possible cases. Statistics help us determine the chances of odds of something occurring, and also of us being wrong. We only want a 5% chance that we're wrong, because that helps us be valid. That helps us be reliable. If something occurs 95% of the time, it's pretty reliable. Here's another canon or rule of the scientific method. It's empiricism, and it goes to do with that observation piece. And it's basically saying knowledge about behavior can be observed and gained by observing. So observing behavior gives a more accurate understanding of the causes of behavior than other methods of gaining knowledge, which is like intuitive. I think that those people are just smarter on that exam, and that's why they got a 90, and those people are just not as smart. Their IQ isn't high, that's why they got an 80. Do you know that? A lot of times on social media, that's what's out there. It's somebody's opinion, and it's just like, well, this is just what I think. And that's not accurate. Another, again, this will be on the test, is another principle of the scientific method. An assumption is there's determinism, that behaviors have identifiable causes. If we're conducting studies to observe behavior, we can understand the factors that cause those behaviors to occur. So again, in the experiment that we were doing, that we talked about, we're trying to control because ideally we don't just have people that are taking an intro to statistics and then a group of people that are taking general psychology. We don't want to compare those two groups. We want to try to compare groups that are the same, so that way we control for other factors. But determinism, we can actually identify what the causes of behaviors are. And also, this is very important. And so if you've ever heard the term Occam's razor, let the simplest explanation suffice, that means that we often rely on the simplest or simpler explanations of behavior are more likely to be correct. So rather than have, well, I think it's because all those people that got 90 on the exam, they got a better night's sleep the night before. Well, how the heck do you know that? Why would that even be, and maybe that's true, but how do we know that? And why wouldn't it just be the only thing that we knew that was different was that this group was listening to a tape or a recording and this group wasn't? So why wouldn't that be the simplest explanation? In psychological research, we try to explain behavior starting with the simplest description and then expanding only when necessary, when it's clear that the behavior is more complex. And what's difficult about human behavior is often more complex. There's often many, many things that go into human behavior and performance. And the last one, and this goes with statistics, it's testability. And so we can falsify. So there's two things here. Falsify and prove. Do we necessarily prove things when we do science? Well, that proves it. That's a truth. Like, yeah, they said there's scientific proof that this exists. But do we actually often prove things in science?
Not 100%, because there's always outliers.
Yeah, that's good. That's good, bringing statistics back in it. So there are always outliers, exceptions to the case. It goes back to that probability. It's not, we don't oftentimes in science have, hey, here's an absolute truth. Or I would say, the law of gravity. So you hear the law, yeah. A law to me is a truth. We all are under the confines of gravity. This planet is massive and it's pulling us toward it. It's just one of the laws that we deal with. Rarely in science do we at this point come up with a new law or a new absolute truth. Especially dealing with humans, it's difficult to prove a truth or 100% of the time with people. So again, it's probabilistic. There are always exceptions, and that's difficult for some people because a lot of people like to live in black and white. Science oftentimes does not live in black and white. Science oftentimes has some gray because you're like, well, 92% of the time this thing worked, but then there's 8% of the time where it didn't. So it's just it's important that we recognize these things going in. But one of the things is that, we can test and falsify. One of the things that we really do well in science is that we falsify. We rule stuff out. We can, run an experiment and just say, well, we know it's not that. And so when we prove things, we often prove things false in science. Because, somebody might come along, well, this always happens. Well, no, I had some science that shows it doesn't always happen, so I prove you wrong. I'll prove you false. The only explanations of behavior that can be tested with the scientific method are those that can be contradicted with observations of behavior. And so it can be falsified. And so I remember a textbook I used to use the illusion of, well, the reason why humans have little thoughts is because there's these little people that run around like mice in little cages and they manipulate little levers in your brain. But then when you go to look, if you ever do an autopsy, those little mice disappear. It's like, no, that's bullshit. You can't have that because you can't ever falsify it because somebody just said, well, that's just because it is. Science doesn't operate that way. So oftentimes when we have people who are very I'll show you. Here's my bookcase of seminary books over there. That's like most of the books I use in seminary. A lot of times, like if you're getting into like understanding like spirituality and faith and those kind of things, science doesn't oftentimes cross over because people, when they operate on faith, are operating on, well, that's just an assumption I have, and you can't see it, and you can't necessarily prove it. And so therefore, there's a conflict between science and religion. It's not really a conflict. It's that science does different stuff. Science, I mean, could be interested in like the effect of somebody like, well, they truly believe this. You can't prove it exists, but they truly believe this. But science is really dealing with what we can observe. There's a guy who wrote this book here. He's a Harvard psychologist, and what his research was, and I've seen him talk before. I saw him here in Oklahoma. His name's Jeffrey Rediger. His research was in spontaneous healing, spontaneous remission, like people have terminal cancers, because these things happen. And he's documented this through science. I mean, he's a scientist. He's a Harvard psychologist. Not like this is just some spoof thing. But I would say this is as close as it gets to trying to measure something that's not really quantifiable. It is quantifiable if you take an MRI of somebody and you see a cancerous mass on their pancreas, and then 2 months later you take another MRI and it's gone, or a CT scan and it's gone. And he documents those things. And those things do occur. What he tried to do in this book was try to find the factors that, okay, well, there's these things occur. What's going on in these miraculous cases where there's healing, where we can't really explain it through science? I think we're getting close with our understanding of epigenetics. Epigenetics is how our genes turn off and on, and how and I think we're getting closer as humans. Is I think that's the newest field, but we're not going to delve into that unless you're really, I mean, more intelligent than me and can come up with a design for epigenetics in an intro to psychology class. But and I've got somebody up there like, yeah, hey, Damien's got his hand up. You ready for that? I'm sorry, I can't hear you.
Okay,
I
there
have
you
a
go.
question for you.
Yeah.
Can you hear me? How do you feel about replication on these research projects?
Replication on the research projects?
Yeah, what's your take on that?
Like your own?
Well, you're replicating the data that you get.
Oh, like this guy or this class that we had?
Well, I just mean for the class that we have.
Oh, so here's how so it's a question about reliability. So the class that you're in, I'm not interested in you running your experiment again. You only have really one shot at your experiment. And so the way that you're going to establish reliability is writing a really solid method section where you piece by piece, step by step show what you're going to do, where it could be replicated if people wanted to.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
Yeah, good question.
Not really, but I read on Reddit that.
All right. So it's testable. So to kind of review that, there's empiricism. It's probabilistic. There's empiricism. We gain knowledge by observing. Determinism. Behaviors have identifiable causes. There's cause and effect. There's parsimony. We want to go for the simplest explanation possible. And we want it to be falsifiable. We want it to be something that we can actually prove right or wrong. We can't, well, I just believe this. Well, okay, that's not necessarily, it's not science. Then you're dealing with maybe more theology or something else. All right. Research versus your intuition. I need somebody to read this for me, please.
Humpty Dumpty sat on the wall. Humpty Dumpty had a great fall. All the king's horses, all the king's men couldn't put Humpty together again. So I asked, what's going on in this nursery rhyme?
Yeah, what's going on? What comes to mind?
Humpty Dumpty just broke.
Yeah?
Humpty Dumpty committed suicide.
Humpty Dumpty's broke.
Humpty Dumpty really is dead if they can't put him back together again.
Broke, maybe.
This research class, you got together, you fought, we're trying to get back together.
So you're getting real metaphorical on it.
Yeah.
Hey, what comes to your mind immediately when you see this? When you hear this nursery rhyme?
I see this
Yeah.
An egg, even though it doesn't even state what Humpty Dumpty is, we only
Is.
think it's an egg because the king's horse and the king's men couldn't put Humpty together again. That would mean it would be an egg or something similar. So we don't
Well, if
know.
you see the
Humpty
cartoon of it, it's got Humpty Dumpty is the egg on the wall, so that's where we get that concept.
Where's the egg? Where if you read in there?
Yeah.
Where is the egg? There is no. So y'all were pretty observant. Most classes say, "Oh, it's an egg," or it's an egg fell off the wall, and it's like, there's no egg. Where'd the egg come from? So, and then we've got different interpretations. Y'all went straight for the metaphor, which I was impressed with. Humpty's broken.
He's dead.
I couldn't put Humpty together again. Somebody said I don't know that he actually jumped off, but said he had a great fall. I don't know that it didn't say he jumped. What is the fall? I don't know. What is the wall?
Maybe an empire.
Yeah, right. I mean, so once we get past like our preconceived notions, so our intuition often fails us because we base our intuition on previous experience. We base our intuition on stuff that we've seen over and over. And again, if you're like me growing up, you saw the broken Humpty, with the knights and the horses next, all the king's horses. Why are the horses trying to put Humpty together? I don't understand. Is this a war thing? I mean, what is? I mean, I don't know. Now that I'm thinking about it a little bit more, why are there even horses involved here?
Maybe they were using their snout to push him back or something,
Right? I don't know. I don't know.
or drag him somewhere. I don't know.
If you think about king's horses, and was Humpty the king? I don't know. They didn't even say if Humpty was the king, because I remember the egg having a crown on their head too. So I don't know. I don't know what's going on. We'd have to do some research, right? Because we actually don't know. All
That's
right.
actually a good question. I never put that much thought into it.
So it's interesting. I'll segue because I just have to. If you ever study theology and like biblical literature, it's interesting how much that we get from other people's like representations of images in the Bible that aren't actually in there. And I was surprised when I went to seminary, like, well, I read that and I looked at actually the language that's in that, and that's not actually in there. And it kind of like, whoa, what is going on? So again, it makes you want to research and figure out what exactly is this. Gang, I've already used this illusion on one of the days because I was scrambling for a lecture because all my technology was failing. But again, this is kind of the flat earth thing. Like we look and our assumption is we look out on the horizon, the earth looks flat, it's got to be flat. And this is an ancient worldview. With the dome in the sky, but it's just we're living on this flat continent, and you could fall off. So our brain can actually play a little some tricks on us sensory wise too. So even if we try to observe something, it's important that we use as many methods as possible. What I want you to do is hold your finger up. Actually, tell me which is darker, the top or bottom, first of all.
Top.
Sure, it looks and it looks and there's even like those on the sides. It looks like
They're the same color, aren't they? It's because of the placement and lighting.
it's the shading. So put your finger up like this over the line in the middle, and then tell me which one is darker. Like close one eye and put.
Oh, they're the same.
Yeah,
The ones on the side aren't.
yeah. It's an
Yeah, they are.
it's an
Once you
optical
picture-
illusion. And it's done because our mind has been conditioned through our experience to expect shading and perceive depth through the shades and different colors that are used. And so it's just a trick. I mean, it's just and so those are actually the exact same color, which is hard to, which is hard to discern. And the ones on the side are different, so they're just kind of giving you the illusion that, hey, that's a different color. So it's important that we use, a lot of different methods to observe and try to, and try to discern what's going on. I'm not going to go into this. This is old. This is from 2011 or something, and somebody trying to disprove global warming by the existence of a snowball. So I'm gonna keep moving on there. Intuition is often based in faulty thinking, and we can be easily swayed by a story that makes sense to our reason, our logic, even when it's wrong. So think about all these YouTube videos out there about conspiracy theories. I mean, it's going wild, guys. I mean, it has been going wild for at least a dozen years with conspiracy, with false information. It's just because we're flooded with information. There's one thing about having a spin on a network with journalists that may have an agenda. It's another thing altogether to have millions of people out there with their own agenda just, flying wild when they're not even trained in journalism. So, for example, the catharsis and anger, the hitting the pillow makes sense. But, that experience, the experiment that we looked at says that's wrong. And again, it's based on probability. They had participants in that experiment that, well, maybe they did punch a pillow and maybe they came back and they said, yeah, I'm not that mad anymore. And they answered the questionnaire that they're not that mad anymore. But most of them were still pretty angry and to an extreme. And so even in that experiment, there's still, like what was said earlier, there's still outliers. And so intuition is off, and so we'll criticize intuition on the test. So think about that too as you are paying attention. We also are biased by the availability heuristic, and that just means when events or memories are vivid or recent or memorable, or come to mind more easily, they may bias our thinking. So would you say there are more deaths by fire or by falling?
Falling.
I say fire.
I think falling, because, well, you fall a lot, and if you have a medical condition and no one's there, chances are the fall accidentally killed you.
Yeah. So falling is actually, so if I wouldn't have primed you with that, oh, by the way, our availability heuristic, if I wouldn't have primed you first and asked you that question, are there more deaths by fire or falling? A lot more of you would have said fire, because you can think death by fire. Oh my gosh, that is awful. Versus falling, that's not as dramatic. Unless you're jumping off a bridge or something, I guess. But it's way more by falling. So think about elderly people. Think about, people that are on our 2 feet. We could fall over and hit our head, and that'd be the end of it. So it's actually the statistics are not really close. There are a lot more deaths by falling. But again, it's that images, and also if I would have primed you with like a house on fire, or like, okay, 14 fires were reported in Oklahoma City last night. Are there more deaths by fire and falling? Oh, it's fire. So we're easily, our minds are easily clouded by, the availability heuristic. And we also get tied up in like the pop thing of the moment, like, oh my gosh, I'm so outraged about this, and then 5 years later, it's like, why did that even matter? We also have this present bias. We fail to think about what we cannot see. If something's in front of us, like for instance, if I wouldn't have primed you in on the Humpty Dumpty thing and just had you think about the egg and moved on, we would have just. We oftentimes try to live through convenience as humans because our lives are very complex. So if we can have a very simple explanation, not have to go and like that Humpty Dumpty thing, golly, I don't have time to think about all this, but there's a lot of different explanations. Our lives are complex and we don't have time to sit and analyze stuff. So oftentimes we're just trying to do things efficiently without sitting and putting a lot of deep thought into it. Science is not about that. Science is about really taking a moment to sit back and analyze and think about something. And there's also this thing called motivation bias. We have a self-fulfilling prophecy. We can also design experiments that, okay, yeah, it's going to support my hypothesis because I controlled things. We focus on the evidence we like the best. This is, really like social media. We search out the information that agrees with us, that doesn't cause dissonance. And I say like a snowball because this was Senator Inhofe. Senator Inhofe actually, if his office in Enid was actually in Continental Towers, where Continental Resources had their building before they moved to Oklahoma City. So there might be some bias that I don't want to talk about global warming or acknowledge it because my office is in a large oil company. Anyway, that's a thing. That was a thing. I used to deliver office supplies there. Confirmatory hypothesis testing. We want to really be careful with this as you design your experiment, because I've asked you to really find something that is important to you. And so oftentimes if we come into a situation with a preconceived bias, what we say can really cloud things. For instance, I had a counselor in our agency where I used to work at Youth and Family Services, and I also served on the child abuse response team. And so I knew from serving on the childhood response team that they had rescued a girl from a sexually abusive situation, and she had a learning disability, and her speech was a little bit limited, but she was able to give investigators a very clear description of what her perpetrator did. It was inappropriate touching. I'll spare you the graphics on that, but it was inappropriate touching. And so we had an inexperienced shelter counselor at that time, and she had been through some traumatic experiences, but she, and that's why she was, there to help, as she felt a calling to help. But when she learned the girl had been through a traumatic experience, so this is after it happened, after she gave the police interview, she said, "Oh, girl, did he rape you?" What's the problem with that?
You planted that in her mind.
From then on, she used the term rape to describe what happened to her. And that was not what happened. I mean, it was sexual abuse. I mean, there was no doubt, but it wasn't rape by law. It wasn't, and so that complicated the case. That complicated her understanding. And so I use that in terms of a clinical example, because we need to also be careful in research, because if we come to the game with pre-existing ideas, we can influence the game by how we're thinking about it. And so we need to be very careful in how we and really not. We work against a confirmatory hypothesis testing, which is we already have a preconceived idea of how it happens, so this is how we assume it happened. People also, I'll say this too, I'll go back to this one more time. This is also why we want to give ourselves only a 5% chance of being wrong. Now, I said research is probabilistic, because we want to fight the urge that, hey, we want to say we found out something new, we want to say it, right? Even if our probability comes up to be 92% that we're right, we don't report it. I mean, we may report it, but we can't say it's statistically significant. We can't say that we truly found an effect. And you're like, crap, Taylor, that's so hard. It is. Science is hard. Science is really hard to support your hypothesis.
So we have to have at least 95% for it to be supportive, correct?
95% certainty. And so there's something called an alpha level, and it's 0.05. So if you remember that from statistics, if your statistics professor talked about alpha equals 0.05, that's really saying you only have a 5% chance of being wrong. And you want less than a 5% chance before you publish and say, hey, I truly have a finding. I found something significant. Now, if you literally did an experiment and it was like 92%, we would replicate, we would do something else on top of that. I mean, if we had the time and we were true scientists, we were so close, we need to do something else. Not to manipulate it, but to show, okay, there's something here, but let's decide exactly what it is. Maybe we try to control for other things, and that brings our margin for error down, and thus puts us over saying, yeah, there was something there. We'll get there in experimental. I'm not too worried about that, but I'm planting a seed as you move forward. You're really trying to control for your own bias. And most people think they are less biased than others. That's one of those Stephen Wright things that I started this semester with. Most people think they are less biased than others. 85% of people are less biased than other people. So anyway, then 50% of other people. Page 39 talks about finding research. I've talked about finding research using Google Scholar, using EBSCOhost. You're looking for empirical journals, looking for primary sources of information. If you find something called a meta-analysis, that's really cool, because that person has already done a lot of literature review and done a lot of statistics to show something that has to do with your variable. And I would encourage you to use those in your paper. And you're like, Taylor, that's really a secondary source. I would consider a meta-analysis a primary source, because they're looking at a bunch of primary sources and coming up with a new conclusion based on all these primary sources. So if you find a meta-analysis, please know I consider that a primary source. Okay, that was it for the slideshow. What questions do we have based on that?
Is this gonna, okay, I know I keep stressing this, and I know this class is gonna give me ulcers because so in this homework assignment, we're basically just, what we need to do is go download basically 2 articles that we believe go with our subjects that we want to write about, correct?
Let me help you with one. I love that you're interested in your assignment, because I want other people to be interested in it. So everybody tune in, because we're gonna help with this. All right. So your assignment or your topic, you're thinking about what?
What I'm going to do my research on.
Yeah.
We're undecided.
Undecided. That's tough. Undecided. How many articles can we find about undecided?
Well, I mean, like we started out with one, and then we started looking it up, and we're going, wow, that can go in every situation, every direction, and we've only got so much time to come up with what we need. So let's go with something maybe that's not so complex, so out there. So we're still trying to, find something that matches our brain cells, I guess.
Right?
To narrow it down, I think I have 10 research articles I can find, but they might just be, I don't know. I think I literally just try to scroll down and skim through it, but I'm still like, yeah, this is gonna take longer than you think. Because
So what I would say, since you're finding a lot, Beatrice, is so let's read the assignment. It may be really small, so I'll read it for you. Let me see if I can just pull it up. So if you're going to submit your assignment, it's right here under second article evaluation assignment. Each of you are considering topics to explore in this class and to design and conduct an experiment or study in the fall experimental psychology class. Please do some research on your own topic using Google Scholar, EBSCOhost. Then upload 2 different articles that would be considered primary sources of empirical information relevant to your topic of interest. With your response, please indicate your topics, or you can be more than one. Like if you're considering, okay, I don't quite have it nailed down, Dr. Randolph, I might want to do this or this. Then tell me. Just tell me, hey, I might want to do this or this or this. So you don't have to be completely nailed down yet. But then I want you to give 3 reasons why you think the articles you shared were valid primary sources of information. So let's stay focused on the assignment that's due Friday. And it's due Friday after, at midnight. So you have a little time to work. You can always do it ahead of time. Let's go to Google Scholar together. And let's see if we can find something to help someone. Who would like help finding a valid primary source that they could actually upload? I'll do a favor if somebody willing to volunteer here. Who wants to volunteer to just, hey, Professor Randolph said I could use this for my assignment, because you can.
Who volunteers as tribute? Because if not, I'll do it. I just watched a bit of Hunger Games last night.
Okay, Beatrice, you're up and ready. All right, so tell me about your topic. What are we researching here?
I was thinking of doing something about psychology and dopamine levels, but that's might be a little bit too much.
Okay, and what specifically about dopamine levels?
Mostly how they would affect a person's performance in a classroom setting, since dopamine's like something that makes you happy, and even if you are doing homework, you might hate it and you don't want to do it, but then after you finish it, you start getting happy because you finish something, and it's like how dopamine would affect a class performance, really.
Okay. So I like what you're doing here. I like that because dopamine is really important chemical. Dopamine is a reinforcement chemical. It induces pleasure, euphoria when it's released. It's like when people hit the jackpot at the casino, they putting in nickel slots, they hit like jackpot $1,000, like, yeah, woo! Now they keep coming back because they had that dopamine. So it's kind of related to addiction too. I mean, there's like when we eat a really, really super good meal. So think about like your favorite meal to eat, to sit down and devour. I mean, and you're like, that makes your mouth water. I mean, there's a little bit of dopamine released when you're thinking about that. If you're like really in love with somebody and you go consummate that relationship, and then there's some dopamine released, while you're, and doing the thing. That's the most dopamine humans get naturally, is like, during sex. And well, you might say, well, there's better sex than others, and yeah, that's true. You might have some more dopamine at one occasion versus another. But so yeah, dopamine's an important chemical, and it is pleasure. And we could have dopamine if we like have a light bulb come on in our mind about, oh my gosh, I never thought about that way. Like that epiphany. I wish people would feel that dopamine more based on my job, because I'm here to like get people interested in ideas about learning. So unfortunately, it's usually not as exciting as sex, but to each their own. So thinking about that, it's going to be tough, number one, to measure our dopamine levels. I don't have equipment in our psych lab to necessarily measure dopamine levels. The closest thing that we could get that I can think of off the top of my head would be like a euphoria scale, which would be like, I feel giddy. Rate yourself on these following emotions. I feel giddy. 5 would be extremely. 4, somewhat. 3, neither, somewhat, nor not. A little bit, none. So you'd have like a Likert scale to measure like giddiness, or I feel excited. That might be another way to measure dopamine levels. So you'd have to come up with like this scale to measure, to truly, because we are measuring things in this class, to measure how that dopamine is. Because I can't just take a blood. We're not going to get approved through IRB unless we like go through biology, and can we like take blood levels of dopamine, and it's even going to be different because it's released in the brain. So It's just that's complicated. I like the ideas there though. So, and this is important. So when you have these ideas, if you're so like Beatrice, you're starting your ideas. It's really like that funnel. I talked to you about, we're putting oil in a car. We've got to have the funnel or else the oil goes everywhere. Same kind of concept. We have to really get our ideas narrowed down before the research is going to make sense. So again, that's the reason I'm having you look at these articles now, is to start thinking about, okay, how can I got these big ideas like dopamine. So let's see what's out there. Let's just help Beatrice see what's out there, since she was a brave soul and volunteered. How do dopamine levels affect classroom or homework performance? Let's see what comes up. That's Google Scholar. And here's my ADHD child doesn't seem motivated. That doesn't even sound like a study. That sounds like somebody's like, we maybe could get something from it because it's Google Scholar. Let's look. I don't think that's a study though. Maybe somebody did a literature review. This looks like
It looks like a literature review.
So it's cool. So it's written by people with licenses. It's written by an MD and an LMFT. Let's see if they cite anything. So they cited Brown in 2005. So they talk about low motivation is generally considered a neurochemistry of motivation. So if we're motivated to learn, we're probably going to do better. Executive function. It's talking about, I think, this might not be a bad place to start. I wouldn't say this is a primary source of information. It looks like what they're doing is a literature review because they're giving you references of these folks. So you can maybe look at that. But that wouldn't be a primary source. Okay, let's see here. Music and videos, distractors for boys with ADHD in the classroom. Comparison with controls. Class, somebody besides Beatrice, what are the odds, just by looking at the title, what are the odds that this is a primary source? Yes or no? I'll just say that. Would you say yes or no? More likely than not.
We can't really see it, Dr. Randolph, to be able to answer that question.
Okay, let me switch. Thank you for letting me know. I'm going to switch screens, and hopefully it'll get a little bigger. Okay, so I'm looking at, is that better?
Yes.
Okay, so I'm looking at the third article down. It says music and video as distractors for boys with ADHD in the classroom, comparison with controls, individual differences, and medication effects. Would you say it's more likely or less likely that this is a primary source of information?
I mean, it looks like it's part of a journal, judging by the green.
Yeah, so Abriana, it's part of a journal. So if I see the word controls in a title, I'm like, that's a primary source because there is an experimental group and a control group. So let's check this out. I'm betting my money right now that this is a primary source, even without seeing the thing. So let's look it up. Let's pull up the PDF because I want you to upload the PDF as part of your assignment. So let's see here. Let me blow this up where we can actually see it, hopefully. It was in the Journal of Abnormal Child Psychology, 2011. It's an older source, but that's okay. We'll run with it for here. I don't care about your date on your source for this assignment. I just care whether it's primary. Let's see the abstract. The study examined the effects of music and video on classroom behavior and performance of boys with and without ADHD. 41 boys with ADHD and 26 controls. Bingo! You know what I've got right now? I've got primary source. How do I know?
It says control.
It literally says control, and it's giving you numbers of participants. And if I scroll down a bit more, 86 boys, wait a minute. I wish it was on the same page. That makes it tough. It says There were individual differences in response to the music, such that some boys were adversely affected and others benefited relative to no distractor. In a second study, music and methylphenidate. I was like, miles per hour? What are they driving in a car? That's actually a drug. That's an ADHD drug. Were assessed. In addition, and in an additional 86 boys with ADHD to examine further the music results. In the presence or absence of music, methylphenidate improved performance relative to placebo. Okay, so basically what they're saying is what they found is when they gave him the ADHD med, it didn't matter whether music was played or not, the performance improved. And then similar individual differences were found as in experiment 1. So basically you found like, well, people with ADHD, that doesn't really go to your topic though, does it?
So what basically what we're looking for is to make sure it's a journal review, has the words controls, has participants in that. We know that this is a primary source.
So another thing about that is what we talked about last time, which is, let me share this. You're going to find a primary source has an abstract, has a lit review, has a method section, has results, has a discussion section, has references, and it may not have appendices in the journal, but it's going to have these others. That's another key. One, it appears to be in a peer-reviewed journal. It was in the Journal of Abnormal Child Psychology. That's a peer-reviewed journal. 2, it talked about having a control group. 3, if we scroll down to results, if we go to this results section, it has statistics that show the results. So like right here, these t-tests, we'll talk about these in one of our assignments. T65 equals negative 2.7. Probability, this is their probability of this occurring by chance, their p-value, equals 0.0072. So they actually found something significant. If they'd have found something insignificant, this p-value would be like p equals 0.7. And that would mean, oh, we found nothing in our research. But it's below 0.005 or 0.05. So if it's below 0.05, that means your probability of making a mistake is even less. The smaller your p-value, the better. But that's showing me, all these type of things are showing me, hey, this is a primary source of information.
Okay.
That's really what I'm interested in this next assignment. Okay? Find the primary sources. Okay, gang, any last questions? We're about a minute over.
So we download them on the backboards, the primary or the
Find the
resources that
primary source, the PDF, just like I did here. You'll want to download this to your device and then upload it as part of your assignment. You'll want to describe 3 reasons why you think it's a primary source, but you also need 2 of them. 2 primary
All right.
sources.
Sorry, I just want to make sure I'm doing it right.
No, you're good. I'm glad you're asking the questions. That helps other students too. Okay, well, gang, be good. Unless something changes, we'll meet here on Zoom again Friday.
The IT lady came in earlier
Yeah.
and was looking for you because she said that they've been working on it for the last 2 days, so they think they got it fixed. So you might
Okay.
want to get in touch with them.
Well, if it's changed, I'll change back, and I'll let y'all know. I'll send out an email. Okay.
Okay.
But I just couldn't. I mean, we made our most progress today because there were no technical issues. So.
Well, I just wanted to let you know she came in. So
Thank you. I appreciate it. See ya.
bye-bye.